Welcome everybody to the seasonal diet, eating what our ancestors ate when they ate it like we were evolved to do. Today we are asking you an important question. Were your ancestors sea people or land people? Today, about 50% of the world's population lives near the coast of some sort, but much more than that live near some body of water, including rivers or lakes, and historically, it's been even greater numbers. This is for good reason. There are some big advantages to living near a body of water that makes life a lot easier, especially for humans living previously in history with less access to transportation like we do today. But in this video, we are specifically exploring the fascinating differences between the diets of ancient people who lived by the sea versus those who made their homes inland, and unveiling how geographical locations shaped not only landscapes but also lifestyles, cultures, and nutritional habits and the local cuisine. So number one, we can speak about the protein sources. This is the obvious one. The source of protein is going to be different between coastal communities and inland communities. Coastal, being blessed with the resources of the sea, they had diets much richer in fish and shellfish and other seafood products. These marine proteins are higher in the omega-3 fatty acids, and that contributed to a diet that modern studies have found to be beneficial for heart and brain health and a lot of other things. In contrast to that, inland populations relied more heavily on land animals, like domesticated animals such as cattle, pigs, poultry, and also they had hunted game, and that was the bulk of their protein intake. They didn't have anywhere near as much seafood as coastal people would have. Of course, coastal people would have gotten access to livestock meat too, and inland people would have gotten some fish in lakes or rivers from time to time, but ultimately this would have been a big difference in the diet and nutrition that your ancestors evolved with. Second one, speaking from the macronutrients to the micronutrients. This is another big difference in the diet. The sea, like I said, offered fish, crustaceans, even seaweeds, shellfish, all that kinds of stuff, each with their own unique nutritional profiles. And these kinds of diets with seafood, they are richer in iodine, selenium, and a lot of other minerals that are quite hard to get enough of outside of seafood. Inland diets, they varied quite a bit with their agriculture, of course, but they leaned heavily on the grains, legumes, and root vegetables. And although those things are nutritious, they sometimes lack the broad micronutrient spectrum that were available to coastal populations. So it is possible that inland people actually evolved to have less requirements for some of these nutrients, these vitamins and minerals that coastal people actually need to function at their best. So this is a key difference that not a lot of people bring up in the evolution of diets. Number 3, food preservation. This was done in both places, of course, but they had a slight difference. Inland communities had to rely much more on different preservation methods for longer parts of the year. They fermented grains and vegetables, and they dried fruits, and they salted or smoked meats, and they developed dairy preservation techniques like cheese making, and this would sustain them through the months in the winter where there was not much else to eat. Coastal communities, of course, they had methods to preserve their food too, all of what I just said in the inland communities, but sea communities also dried and smoked and salted their fish. But they had much less of a need for food preservation than inland peoples. Even in the winter, when there wasn't much growing and they had slaughtered a large part of their livestock, coastal people, all they would need to do is take a quick row out to sea, or even just stand on a pier or a rock somewhere and cast their fishing line out, and they would get some fresh quality meat, protein all year round, and that is a luxury that inland people did not have as much. So that is also a big difference. Number 4, a very important one, trade and cultural exchange. Trade routes and cultural exchanges were really influenced by these dietary differences. Coastal communities often traded salted fish and other sea products with their inland neighbors in exchange for the things like grains and the textiles and other foods that are not really available so much by the sea. So populations got the best of both worlds there in both places. But coastal people specifically would have had access to trade routes going much farther away across different countries across the world, giving them much better access to things like foreign spices, recipes, and all manner of food products that the inland people didn't necessarily have. And the last one, as we fast forward to the present day, it's actually surprising to see how many of these ancient dietary practices remain embedded in our modern cultures. Coastal regions around the world still celebrate their maritime heritage through festivals and culinary traditions that feature seafood primarily. Similarly, inland cuisines continue to be celebrated for their hearty grains, cheeses, meats, and much more things like that. Of course, with modern technology and preservation and transport, we don't have to follow our ancestors' diets as strictly as they would have been forced to do hundreds or even thousands of years ago. But we today can still model some of our dietary practices based on how our ancestors evolved. For example, if your ancestors were from inland areas, it would be a lot more livestock meat, preserved meat, grains, fruits and vegetables, more local traditional cuisine, and more variability depending on which season of the year you're in. On the other hand, speaking opposite about the coastal people, it would be less livestock and preserved foods, and it would be more fish and seafood, with less variability in seasonal diet changes, at least to a certain extent. Also, if your ancestors are from the sea, they may have indulged in a bit more exotic cuisine than their inland kin. And I know it sounds a bit odd for us today, and also expensive for us today, it's difficult, but coastal peoples previously, at any point in history, they were probably eating fish 4 or 5 days out of the week, even more in some places in the world. I'm not saying I recommend that, I'm just saying that's how our ancestors ate. But let us all know, where are you all from? How do you like to eat? How often do you eat seafood? Where did your ancestors come from? Let us know down below in the comments.